I'm so glad you decided to join me for another chapter book today. We're going to start a new one called The Chocolate Touch. Oh my, I think you're going to like it. This is a pretty fun story. So here we go. The Chocolate Touch, Chapter 1. Most of the time, John Midas was a very nice boy. Every now and then, of course, he broke a rule, such as the rule against pretending to be a tiger when his sister Mary was supposed to be going to sleep. Generally speaking, though, he behaved pretty well. He could have behaved better, I guess. He lived in a very comfortable house surrounded by green grass and wide-spreading shade trees that were very good for climbing. His mother was nice, and she was a good cook. His father, when he did not have to hurry to work, spent hours telling John interesting things about baseball, beetles, bird nests, boats, and butterflies. John went to school and he liked it. His teacher, Miss Plimsoll, was fairly easy to get along with as long as he did good work. He had received a new, shiny golden trumpet and music lessons as a going-to-school present this year. Miss Quaver, the music teacher, had soon agreed to let him play small parts, a few notes at a time with the school orchestra. Finally, there was Susan Buttercup, who was also in his class. Susan had soft yellow curls, round pink cheeks, blue eyes, and one of the best collection of marbles in the entire neighborhood. John should have been completely well-behaved and happy, but he wasn't. He had one bad fault. He was a pig about candy. Boiled candy, cotton candy, licorice of any kind, old-fashioned toffees, orange candies, lemon slices, Cracker Jacks, jelly beans, fudge, black currant lozenges for ticklish throats, nougat, peppermint sticks, lollipops, marshmallows, and above all, at the top of the list, was chocolate. Any kind of chocolates. He would eat them all. While other boys and girls spent their money on model airplanes, magazines, jump ropes, and pet lizards, John studied the candy counter. All his money went to candy, and all the candy went to himself. He never shared it. John Midas was a candy freak. At lunch, one Saturday, Mrs. Midas noticed a couple little red dots on the end of John's nose. "Oh, look," she said to Mr. Midas. "John has spots." Mr. Midas leaned forward and looked at them. Oh, he shook his head and clicked his tongue. John tried to look too, but it's very hard to see the end of your own nose without a mirror, unless you happen to be an elephant with a long nose that you could just bend up. When John tried to look at the end of his nose, first one eye and then the other eye, and then with both eyes, all that he could see was a pink blur. Besides, trying to look at something so close made his eyes hurt. "Oh, I can't see any spots, Mother," John said.
"Well, I can,"
Mr. Midas said.
"Just because you don't see something doesn't mean it's not there. Feel the end of your nose with your finger."
John rubbed his finger on the tip of his nose. It felt a bit bumpy. "Oh no, it may be the measles," Mrs. Midas said anxiously. She placed her hand on John's forehead to feel if he was warmer than normal. "But I don't think he has a temperature," she decided.
I suspect John has been eating too much candy again,"
Mr. Midas said.
"Have you been eating candy this morning, John?"
"Some," John admitted. "What?" Mr. Midas asked. "Well," John replied, I had a few cream delights. Susan gave them to me."
"Anything else?"
Mr. Midas asked. "Yeah, I had a little toffee crunch," John said.
"And what else?"
Mr. Midas asked, beginning to look angry. John's ears turned red. He knew he was not supposed to eat candy, especially before meals. Hardly anything else," he said. "John," Mr. Midas said. And his son recognized that tone of voice. It meant that John had better tell everything now. It turned out that John had been around to see all of his friends that day and had managed to get candy from nearly all of them. The list was very long.
"Well, no wonder you have spots,"
Mr. Midas said at last.
"I think we better take John to see Dr. Cranium,"
he said to Mrs. Midas. Dr. Cranium was a tall, thin man with a bald head and a gray mustache. He looked as though his glasses Dr. Cranium was a tall, thin man with a bald head and a gray mustache. He looked through his glasses at John and said,
It's a lot of candy, Mr. Midas said.
He hasn't been eating his meals properly, Mrs. Midas said.
Yep, that's what I thought, Mr. Cranium said. I can tell by looking at him he eats too much candy.
The doctor put a little light into John's right ear, and then he put the light into John's left ear, and then he shone it up John's nose. Then he told John to open his mouth wide and say, "Ah," and then he shone the light into John's mouth.
Oh, much too much candy. Gracious me, seems to be full of candy.
He told John to sit down and relax. Then he picked up a small rubber-headed hammer, and he gave John a light tap on the right knee with it, just below the joint. John's foot gave a little tiny kick. John giggled.
This is nothing to laugh about,
Mr. Midas said.
No, it's not.
The doctor.
It's nothing to laugh about,
Mr. Midas said.
No, John, the doctor reproved him. A healthy little boy who didn't eat too much candy would kick a lot harder than that.
I'm sorry, John said politely. I can kick harder if you want me to. And then he gave a sudden high kick, which knocked the hammer out of Dr. Cranium's hand, and it landed on the rubber head and then bounced across the whole room. John! Exclaimed Mrs. Midas. I'm so sorry, Dr. Cranium. John, tell the doctor you were sorry for kicking his hammer. I'm sorry I kicked your hammer, John said.
Yes, I would recommend you eating a lot less candy,
Dr. Cranium told Mr. and Mrs. Midas and John.
An upset stomach can lead to all sorts of terrible things.
On the way home, Mr. Midas tried to explain to John what he thought that the doctor meant by complications. On the way home, Mrs. Midas tried to explain to John what she thought the doctor had meant by complications. You see, she said, if you put too much of one kind of food into your stomach and not enough of the other kinds, it's bad for your whole body because different parts of your body need different kind of food. Don't you understand? Yeah, I think so, John said.
You've been eating too much sweet stuff, Mr. Midas added. That there isn't room for eggs and meat and milk and bread and spinach and apples and fish and bananas and all the other things you're supposed to have to make you grow big and strong.
Yeah, I like bananas, John said, especially thin sliced ones covered in chocolate. They're called banana surprises. Mr. Midas looked at Mrs. Midas, and Mrs. Midas looked at Mr. Midas. They both shrugged their shoulders. Sometimes it was really hard to get John to understand things. At home, while Mrs. Midas was busy in the kitchen, Mr. Midas continued to reason with John.
You mean you'd rather eat candy than anything else, and chocolate rather than any other kind of candy?
Mr. Midas asked. Yes, John assured him. Oh, yes.
Don't you think there's such a thing as enough?
Mr. Midas said.
Don't you think that things are best in their places? I mean, don't you think there's a time for spaghetti and a time for roast beef and even a time for fish and garlic toast, as well as a time for chocolate? Or would you rather just have chocolate all the time?
Chocolate all the time, John replied. Chocolate's the best, that's all. Other things are just food. But chocolate is, it's chocolate.
Yeah, I think I understand.
Mr. Midas broke in sharply.
Very well.
He took a deep breath and went on.
John,
He said,
if you can't understand what sort of a diet is really best for you, can't you at least just get it into your head that you make your mother very sad when you eat so much candy and you don't eat any of the good food she makes?
The conversation always seemed to get turned around into what effect John's candy-eating had on his mother. John could not see how it could possibly do her any harm if he ate candy. He sat silent for a moment, then he said, May I go outside and play, please, Dad? Chapter 2. It was Sunday afternoon. The sun was shrinking low in the sky, but the air was quite warm. John was wandering along in the direction of Susan's house, absent-mindedly looking down at the sidewalk, when his eye was suddenly caught by a dull, gleaming, silvery gray coin lying right in his path. The coin was the size of a quarter, but even as he leaned over to pick it up, John noticed there was something strange about the coin. It did not have a picture of George Washington on it, or a picture of an eagle.
On one side, there was a picture of a really fat boy. On the other side, there were the letters J.M., which was funny, John thought, because those letters were his initials. Grasping the coin firmly, he ran on toward Susan's house. She liked to collect things. He thought she might be interested to know that now he had the beginning of a coin collection. Although he was in the habit of going over to Susan's by the same route once or twice almost every single day, this afternoon John found himself turning left when he was supposed to be turning right. I always go the same way, he thought. This time for a change, maybe I'll go a new way. He didn't stop to think that you cannot go east by going west unless you go all around the whole world. Only 2 blocks along the unfamiliar street, and John came to a small store on the corner. It was a neat red brick building with 2 big show windows. They were full of all sorts of candy. Susan was immediately and absolutely forgotten. John pressed his nose against one of the windows. He was imagining the taste of chocolate-covered almonds and chocolate fudge on the other side of the glass, and then he noticed a man in a white apron standing behind the counter and beckoning to him. John was surprised. He hadn't expected the store to be open on a Sunday.
Ho, ho, ho! Don't just stand there in the doorway, John, the man called heartily. Come on in, get some fresh, sweet, creamy chocolate. That's our special today.
How did that man know his name? John wondered. He couldn't ever remember having been in that store before. The storekeeper saw John hesitate.
Oh, come on. The chocolate I use in my kitchen comes direct from the heart of Africa, he said. I use none but the finest ingredients in all my recipes. Well, I bet you've never had chocolate like mine before. Come on in.
Thank you, John replied, walking into the store and up to the counter. But, you see, the trouble is, well,
No money, huh?
the storekeeper asked.
No money whatsoever? What do you got there in your hand?
John had forgotten the coin that he was holding in his hand. Oh, he said, well, this is part of my coin collection. He added more honestly, I'm going to save this coin and get some more to make a collection.
Well, let me have a look at that,
The storekeeper said. And then he looked briefly at the coin. Aha! He exclaimed. Why, is it good? John asked, his hopes rising.
Yes, this is very good, said the storekeeper. In fact, it's the only kind of money I take. But I don't suppose you'd want to spend it on a box of...
A whole box?
Oh, yes, but I imagine you'd rather keep this for your coin collection and not spend it on chocolate. Am I right?
Oh, no, John said. Chocolate any day.
Well, go ahead then. Help yourself.
The storekeeper pointed to a beautiful table piled high in the middle of the store with large candy boxes. They were all exactly alike. You mean I can have one of those? John asked. His eyes were round with surprise. The candy boxes were as big as the ones that his father would bring home at Christmas.
Yep, help yourself, the storekeeper assured him. That is, unless you think you might better ask your mother first.
Nah, she won't care, John said quickly, and then he blushed. John tucked one of the large boxes under his arm. He declined the storekeeper's offer to wrap it as a gift, and thanked him and hurried out of the store before there would be any question or anybody changing their minds. The storekeeper smiled as he watched his customer hurry down the street. John decided that it might be smart to enter the house quietly through the kitchen. With the large candy box hidden behind him, he let himself in by the back door and snuck up the kitchen stairway on tiptoes toward his own room on the top floor. Just as he was about to round the corner on the second floor to continue his way upstairs, he had to stop for just a moment while his father walked by, coming along the hall from the bedroom on the telephone.
Well, why, yes. Okay, goodbye. Hey, that was Mrs. Buttercup on the phone,
Mr. Midas called to Mrs. Midas as he walked down the front stairs.
She said she was sad that John hadn't been able to come over and play with Susan this afternoon. But it was a good thing in a way, she thought, because Susan's also very excited about her birthday party tomorrow. I wonder where John went.
As soon as the second floor was quiet again and John knew there was no danger that his candy box could be seen, he hurried quietly into his bedroom and he pushed open the door. Then he slid the box under the bed. Then he walked very heavily down the stairs to the living room. Well, there you are, said Mrs. Midas. We couldn't imagine where you could have been. What have you been doing? I was just kind of playing, John said. John usually took a very long time to put his things away and undress and take a bath and get ready for bed, for he thought sleeping was a waste of time. But this evening he started yawning long before his bedtime. Boy, I'm sleepy, John announced. Oh, all right, Mrs. Midas said. Well, you better get ready for bed then. Time for your vitamins. John's vitamins came in a bottle. It had been prescribed by Dr. Cranium. John had to drink a big spoonful of this stuff every night to make up for all the vegetables and the fruits that he left on his plate at lunch and dinner. The vitamins tasted like soap, mud, glue, ink, and paint. It was terrible. Much to Mrs. Midas' surprise, John ran right into the dining room cupboard where the vitamin was kept. By the time she got there, he had already filled up his spoon with the sticky stuff. Then, without any coaxing, he emptied it all into his mouth. Ugh, John sputtered. Ugh. Well, that is a very good boy, Mrs. Midas said. Now, why can't you be sensible and just eat up your dinner like that? If you'd only stop eating so much candy, you'd be able to eat your meals properly. You wouldn't need to take all these vitamins. Soon John was scrubbed and in his pajamas and straight into bed, ready to be tucked in for the night. Mrs. Midas sat on the bed and stroked his forehead for a moment. Then she leaned forward and kissed his cheek. John pretended that he was very sleepy, so he shut his eyes and began breathing hard. When Mrs. Midas rejoined Mr. Midas in the living room, she said, I've never known John to be so good about going to bed before. He was asleep in no time. A few seconds after the bedroom door had closed behind his mother, John leapt to the floor. He got down on his hands and knees and fell under the bed for that candy box. He soon had it on the pillow, and he set to work opening it up. First he took off the thin outer sheet of plastic. Then he lifted up the lid. Then he removed a sheet of cardboard. Then he pulled off a square of heavy tinfoil. Then he took out a layer of shredded up paper. As the wrappings piled up all around him, John became nervous. But then he found it. At last, he came to a very small ball of cotton batting. And then there, in the middle of the cotton, was a little golden ball. He picked at the ball with his fingernail and peeled away the gold paper. And then he saw a tiny piece of plain chocolate. It was the only piece of chocolate in the whole box. Very sad. John nevertheless put this chocolate into his mouth. He had never tasted a chocolate quite like this. It was the most chocolatey chocolate he had ever eaten. That's the end of chapter 2. So, we've met quite a few characters. Our main character seems to be John, who loves chocolate, chocolate, chocolate. I wonder if that's why the book is called The Chocolate Touch. I'm also wondering something else. What food or candy or dessert, what thing that you eat would you say that you like more than anything else? What's the one food that you would pick to have before you would pick to have anything else? So we know that John would pick to have chocolate, but I'm wondering, what would you pick to eat? I think it's hard to pick just one favorite. I have a lot of favorites. Oh, I don't know though. Eating crab dunked in butter has to be at the top of my list of most favorite things. If I could eat that right now this second, I would definitely choose crab dunked in butter. Hey, let me know what you would like. And join me again tomorrow for a little more of the Chocolate Touch. I think you're going to be very surprised at what happens next. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.